Good morning, Year 4. Hope you're all well. I'm enjoying this reading and kind of keeping in contact with you. I hope you are too. As they say, as these YouTubers say, you can comment below if you want to, or just via Seesaw if you want to tell me if you're enjoying it, if you're not, if you're finding it difficult, or whatever. Okay. Right. Well, so we left Marty and Arthur, and they were escaping, weren't they? They were getting away and trying to escape. So let's see where they get on. This next chapter, is called "Wide as the Ocean." How easily we fell into despair, the two of us, as we left the shade of the gum trees. How quickly the heat of the sun sapped our strength and our spirits too. The desire for water was fast becoming a craving. The need to find it became obsessive. Within just a few hours, all we could talk about, however hard we tried not to, was water. I didn't care any longer if Big Black Jack was walking straight back to Cooper Station, right up to the farmhouse, nor if Piggy Baker might be tracking us down and coming after us. Every shimmering watery horizon we saw raised our hopes, but we soon found out we could not trust even the evidence of our eyes. Mirages mocked us time and again. We tried best to ignore them. But a mirage is only a mirage once you've discovered it's a mirage. Until then, it's a pool of clear water just waiting for you, a pool of hope. A mirage, by the way, is kind of a figment of your imagination, something you think is there on the horizon, but when you get there, it's actually not there. But in the end, we didn't even have the energy for that. The deep gully we were following was sandy, but upon the banks there were patches of brambles and scrub, and here and there clusters of stringy bark gum trees. Where there were trees, we thought there must be water. Little did we know. So we rode down the dried up gully, hoping all the while to discover a hidden pool in the shadows. But everywhere we found nothing but earth turned to dust. There wasn't a sign of moisture, and all through this futile search the sun rose ever higher, blazed hotter. Gathering enough thoughts to decide anything was so difficult. But we did manage to concentrate enough to make one decision between us. We invested in it all our last hopes. We could see the ground ahead of us on one side of the gully, rising steeply into a granite cliff. From the top of this cliff we thought we must be able to see for miles around. That from up there we'd be bound to spot a river perhaps, or a pool. But Big Black Jack refused to be diverted from the gully, and we knew already he was far too strong to argue with. He went where he wanted to. He went where he wanted to go, and that was all there was to it. So in the end we had to get off him and lead him up the slope to the highest point of the cliff. The whole of Australia lay before us, it seemed, as wide as the ocean, and just as inhospitable too. We could see the gully winding its way through the bush, other gullies joining it to make one great swathe of sand through the scrub, but there was not a glint of water anywhere, not a shimmer to be seen. Now I really was beginning to hope that Piggy Bacon would find us and take us back to Cooper Station. I didn't care about the beatings I knew he'd give us. I only thought of the wash buckets on the veranda and plunging my head into them and drinking all of it, one by one. Marty was not lost like I was. He had not given up so easily. He was pointing excitedly at what he swore must be a place where there was water, and certainly in the distance there seemed to be a patch of much greener, lusher vegetation around some very tall trees. It was miles away, and it didn't look at all promising to me. I didn't say so, though. "If it's green, then there's got to be water somewhere," Marty said. "Got to be. Come on." Even if there had been a convenient rock from which to mount, I don't think either of us would have had the strength to do it. We could only manage to walk now with the greatest effort, so we led Big Black Jack down the hill and into the gully again. We found Marty's promised oasis, but doing it drained us utterly of our last will power. There were trees, and it was green, but we could find no water. By now the sun had worked its worst on us. My head was swimming so much I often thought I would faint. I kept stumbling, and so did Marty. Breathing heavily now, and lathered up, Big Black Jack wandered away from us into the deeper shade, put his head against the trunk, and rested on it on 3 legs. Like us, he'd had enough. He could do no more. He was telling us in his own way that we should do it too, that we should never have ventured out into the heat of the day in the first place. We lay down nearby. I curled up against Marty's back for comfort. "We'll be all right," he said to me, but I knew how far we were from all right. Even so, it cheered me a little to hear him say it. I tried not to think that if I slept I might never wake up again, but I thought it all the same. Sleep, when it came, was so welcome. It was evening when I woke, and I knew at once we were not alone. They were crouching a few paces away, a dozen of them perhaps, bushmen, men and boys. They were studying us intently, as still as the rocks around them. I shook Marty until he sat up and took notice. "It's the same ones," he whispered. "The same ones that brought Wes back. I recognise them." "Say something," I said. "You've got to say something." "Drink," Marty mimed as he spoke it. "Water. We need water. Understand?" That was when the tallest of them came forward and crouched down close to us. I recognised him then. It was the old bushman who had come to Ida's house that day and treated my spider bite. He smiled at me like a stranger you've met before who is happy you've remembered him. He held out his cupped hands. His hands were full of fruit, red fruit, green fruit, like plums but rounder. We ate them, we drank them, we devoured them. I don't remember the taste, but I remember savouring the juice of each one, sucking out every drop of it. They gave Big Black Jack some too, which he snuffed up eagerly. Then they motioned to us to stand up, to mount up. We tried, but they soon saw we couldn't do it without their help. I was lifted up effortlessly and sat astride Big Black Jack. So was Marty, who was sitting behind me now and hanging on. One of the bushmen took the reins and led us along the gully. They were all around us, the children among them smiling up at us now. When I smiled back, they laughed out loud, and I knew they were not laughing at me, but out of sheer delight. It touches me even now when I think of it. It was a little moment, and at the same time a great moment, one I have always treasured. "They're taking us back," Marty whispered in my ear, "like they did with Wes." "Only we're not dead," I said. Within an hour or so, they brought us through some scrubby trees to a hidden pool, a basin of dark rock. A cool evening breeze rippled the surface of the water. We needed no invitation, and nor did Big Black Jack. He trotted to the edge and was drinking even before we managed to tumble off him. We were alongside him then, all 3 of us, one muzzle and 2 mouths drinking in all we could. Then Big Black Jack was shaking his dribbles all over us, and the bushmen were laughing. They drank too, but they were in no hurry. They did not gulp greedily, as we had. Instead, they scooped it up one-handed and sipped it. In no time a fire was going. They spread some fish and cooked them. I tried to eat slowly as they did, but it wasn't easy, and there was more fruit afterwards, more berries. Big Black Jack browsed nearby. We could hear his jaws grinding, his teeth crunching. He was eating well too. I expected we would sleep then because night was coming fast, but we didn't. Instead, they lifted us up again onto Big Black Jack, and together we moved on into the gathering dark. When I looked up, I found that the stars were up there again, filling the sky from end to end. I thought then of the night before, of how happy we'd been to be free, how we'd sung to the stars, and now we were being taken back to Cooper's Station, and there was nothing whatsoever we could do about it. I wondered why the bushmen were doing it, whether Piggy was paying them for hunting us down and bringing us back, but I thought that couldn't be right, that after all, these were people I'd seen him driving away from the farm with his horsewhip when they strayed too close. I did whisper to Marty that we could try and tell them we didn't want to go back, but he thought it was pointless. They wouldn't understand a word we said, he told me, so what's the point? All night long I dreaded the morning and the first sight of Cooper's Station. I dreaded the thought of standing there on punishment parade, hand outstretched, trying to hold back the tears. The more I thought about it, the more I feared the coming of morning. That was why I took my lucky key out of my pocket and clutched it tight, so tight that it hurt me. I wanted to squeeze the luck out of it, to have all of it now, because I needed it now more than I'd ever needed in my life. But I began to worry that maybe even my lucky key wouldn't be enough, so I prayed as well. I thought of Ida then and of all she'd done for us, of the trouble she'd be in if Piggy found out she'd unlocked the door for us. I felt for the little wooden cross I wore around my neck. I touched it, remembering her. And then holding it, I prayed for her, but if I'm honest, I think I prayed mostly for myself. Whether it was the key or the cross that did it, I shall never know. I've been trying to work that one out ever since. I still am. Couple of raggedy little scarecrows. It wasn't until a few more days had passed that Marty and I could begin to hope that the Bushmen weren't taking us back to Cooper Station after all. Neither of us could believe these people were lost. They seemed to know every root, every tree, every gully in this maze of wilderness. The fruit they found was never a surprise, nor the roots they dug up, nor the pools they led us to. They knew exactly where they were. They belonged in this place. They found their way through the bush with such obvious ease that it was quite impossible to think they could ever get lost here. So if they were not lost, and we weren't being deliberately led around in circles, and if after all this time we had still not yet Cooper Station, then it stood to reason we weren't going there. So where were they taking us then? Marty and I asked each other that question more than a few times, but we had no answers. With every hour that passed, the bush around us looked less and less familiar. We were in a much greener country. There were hills about us and more farms and settlements in the valleys, which the bushmen seemed to want to avoid as much as we did. We knew now, for whatever reason, they were not taking us back, and the longer we were with them, the more sure we became that these people were absolutely no threat to us. They might not talk to us, they might keep their distance, they might still stare at us more than we liked, but there was never the slightest hint of hostility towards us. On the contrary, they seemed very protective of us, and as fascinated by us as we were by them. And the children found us endlessly funny, particularly when we smiled, so we smiled a lot. But then we felt like smiling. They shared their food with us, berries, roots, fruit, and baked wallaby once. We had all the water we had ever needed. Marty did try once or twice to ask where we were going, but was simply given more fruit or berries as an answer, so he gave up. But on Big Black Jack, as we rode through the night, or resting in the shade, the two of us speculated at length. Maybe we weren't being taken anywhere. I mean, they never looked as if they were going anywhere in particular. They just looked as if they were quite happy simply going, simply being. Or maybe they were adopting us into their tribe, and we'd wander the bush with them for the rest of our lives. Maybe they were still making up their minds what to do with us. Perhaps we'd just wake up one day and find them gone. We really didn't mind. All we could be sure of was that we were a long, long way from Cooper Station now, and further every day. Where we were going wasn't important. Sometimes at night we'd see lights in the distance, more settlements probably, but we never once thought of running off. We were safe with them. We had no reason to leave them. I can't say exactly how many days and nights our journey lasted. It could have been 5 or 6 perhaps. I do know that it lasted long enough for Marty and I to begin believing it might be permanent, that we had indeed been adopted in some way. I was certainly beginning to feel comfortable among them, not because they became any less reserved, they didn't. Distance seemed to be important to them. The children, though, were a different story. We very soon got beyond just smiling and laughing. We splashed each other in the pools, we skimmed stones, we threw sticks, ambushed one another. One took to riding piggyback on Marty's back, and the smallest of them would often ride up with us on Big Black Jack, loving every minute of it. We were finding our place among them, beginning to feel accepted. That's why, when our journey finally ended, we felt all the more abandoned, all the more rejected. We had been travelling through a hilly country for a day or two now, and Big Black Jack was finding it very hard going, and not just because of the hills either. We knew already that kangaroos made him nervous, but there hadn't been many of them until now. Now they were everywhere, and he was not happy. In the half-dark we could see their shifting shapes, and so could Big Black Jack. We could feel him tensing beneath us. We tried to calm him, smooth his neck, pat him gently, but nothing seemed to work. His ears would be twitching frantically. He'd toss his head and snort at them. Worst of all, he'd just stop without any warning. Falling off was all too easy. It amused the children hugely, but it was painful for us. In the end, Marty and I decided it would be better altogether, and safer too, to give Big Black Jack a rest and walk. So during the last couple of nights of our journey, we walked with the bushmen, one of us leading Big Black Jack. He seemed happier that way. He puffed less and snorted less. The last night we were with them, I felt as if I was really one of them, sharing the silence and the stars. The next morning, as the sun came up, we were coming to the top of a high hill. It had been a long, steep climb. Below us was a wide green valley with a stream running through, and trees, more trees than I'd ever seen in my life. In front of us, on the crest of the hill, the bushmen had stopped and were talking amongst themselves. I thought we'd be resting here for a while, and was only too happy about that because my legs were tired and I was longing for food and sleep. I sat down to investigate a thorn in my foot which had been troubling me. Beside me, Big Black Jack was cropping the grass contentedly. Suddenly Marty called out, "They're going! They're leaving us!" Sure enough, the bushmen were walking away from us back the way we'd come, the children looking over their shoulders at us from time to time as they went. We called after them again and again, but they didn't stop. Then they rounded the side of the hill and were gone. "Why?" Marty said. "Why here? Why did they leave us here?" We stood there in silence, each of us trying to make some sense of what was happening to us and why they had treated us this way. We felt utterly bewildered. The parting had been so unexpected, so sudden and strange, no goodbyes, not even a wave of the hand. That was when Big Black Jack began snorting again. I looked around for kangaroos. There were none, not that I could see anyway, but Big Black Jack had stopped eating mid-chew. He had his head up now and his ears pricked. He whined loud and long, so that the valley rang with it. He was lifting his nose, sniffing the air and listening. We could hear kookaburras and galas and the cackle of the bush at daybreak, but certainly nothing out of the ordinary. But then we heard the sound of whistling and someone singing, a woman singing, and with it the tread of a horse in amongst the trees below us. A saddle creaking. Big Black Jack whined again. A great bay horse was coming out of the trees and up the hills towards us, and on its back a rider in a wide-brimmed straw hat. But it wasn't the horse or the rider that we were looking so much as the cavalcade that was following along behind. A cavalcade of creatures, all of them infants, wombats, wallabies, joeys. And as the rider came closer, I could see there was a koala clinging round her neck, looking at me over her shoulder. She rode right up to us, let the horses touch noses and check each other over. Meanwhile, she took off her hat, looked us up and down. I have never forgotten the first word she spoke to us. "Struth," she said. "Look what the cat brought in." But maybe it wasn't a cat, right? How'd you get here? It was the bushman, Marty told her. I thought as much. Are you waifs and strays then? They only bring me waifs and strays. They know I collect them, see? They don't eat the little ones, not unless they've got to. Good people they are, just about the best, I'd say. Where are you from? England, I said. There was a wombat rooting around my feet now. It's all right. He won't bite, she told me. You've come a far way then. We were at Cooper Station, said Marty. We've escaped. I know Cooper Station. Mr. Bacon's place, right? Where's he got all these orphan kids? She looked us up and down. He used to be the preacher in town before they moved out there, she continued. If there's one thing I can't abide, it's fanatics of any kind, and religious ones are the worst of all. Running away from the place seems a pretty sensible thing to do. You'll be looking for somewhere to stay then. Marty and I looked at one another. She was turning her horse now and walking away from us, her little animals following her. Well, are you coming or what? She called out. If you are, then bring the poor old black horse with you. He needs feeding up by the looks of him. Come to that, so do you. Couple of raggedy little scarecrows, that's what you are. I'll soon fatten you up. Come along if you're coming. Don't spend too long thinking about it. Haven't got all day. Marty and I didn't need to think twice about it. We followed along behind the cavalcade, and like us, Big Black Jack had a new spring in his step. The lucky key of yours, said Marty. You still got it? Yeah, I replied. Just don't ever lose it, that's all, he said. Well, that was a bit brighter, wasn't it? It looks like they're finally getting somewhere and hopefully a little bit of happiness. Right, I'll leave you with that and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Goodbye.